Hey folks, do you ever wonder about salvation? What it is? In terms of the biblical New Testament, you are saved kind of salvation. Been thinking about it a lot. Today, I spent a fair bit of time this morning, more than I normally would, watching some sermons and some messages from this past weekend from some pastors. See what's being said. See if they're offering anything that feeds me. Some are. There's some really wonderful sermons out there. Bishop Michael Curry, the top bishop of the Episcopalian Church in the United States, he offered a wonderful, just brilliant sermon this weekend. Absolutely life-giving. Wonderful, uplifting message. And then there were others. And it was these others that inspired me to ask the question about salvation. You see, what those others are saying is those others are saying things about God's wrath. Right? God's wrath. If we don't do this, God's wrath is going to come down. If we do that, God's wrath is going to come down. If you do this, God's wrath is going to come down. If you do that, God's wrath is going to come down. And so I began asking myself, these are Christian shows. These are Christian speakers. I began asking myself, what about salvation? See, salvation is one of the rewards of embracing the gospel. Right? As I said in a video a couple of days ago, the gospel is about liberation. We're free from the power of sin and death. Well, salvation is part of that. We're saved from the power of sin and death, but we're also granted the ability to live in a relationship with God that is secure. A relationship with God that is ever growing. A relationship with God that can never be taken away from us. And so that as our life here on this planet, here on this rock, progresses, and we find ourselves one day face to face with God, that we are accepted. We won't be turned away. We won't be cast out. God won't turn away from us. That's what salvation is. Through Christ, we have salvation. Now, this is throughout the New Testament. And I know somebody's going to say to me at some point in the comments or send me an email saying, yeah, but you're forgetting about what it said in Matthew where not everyone who says, Lord, Lord, is going to enter into my kingdom, but only those who do the will of the Father. Sure thing. Okay. And what is the will of the Father? That mercy and justice become key principles in our life and that we walk humbly with God. The prophets. So let's assume key principles in our life are mercy and justice, and we are doing our ever-loving best to walk humbly with God continuously as students, seeing ourselves as the sponges of knowledge and theology so that we can grow in knowledge of God. But what then is the point of salvation if, as these pastors talk about, I need to continuously be looking over my shoulder for the wrath of God to come raining down upon me? That I am one slip up. We as communities are one slip up. We are one election. We are one tax hike. We are one political initiative. We are one law being passed, one Supreme Court justice away from God throwing lightning bolts. What's the point? How could that possibly be salvation if I now have to walk throughout the rest of my life terrified that I or we or they may screw up so much that God punishes me or us or all of us together? It's not salvation. At best, it is a reprieve that all Jesus is doing, according to those pastors who talk about how we need to be afraid and how we need to walk the line. At best, Jesus is distracting God for us. But at some point, Jesus is going to go, you know what, I'm done distracting. That's it. God, you go to it. And we're going to pay the price. It's not how Jesus talks about salvation. It's not how Paul talks about salvation. That kind of theology tells us that, yeah, Jesus wasn't really as important as you think. We are actually in this state of sacrifices on a regular basis to keep God from being angry with us, to appease God, to keep God copacetic. But if you mess up, if you screw up, God's going to get you. No. This isn't a message of hope. This isn't a message of salvation. This isn't a message of love. These are messages of fear. May the Lord bless you. May the Lord keep you. May the Lord's face be made to shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord's countenance be lifted up to you. May you always know the peace of being in the Lord's presence. I pray that as a person of faith, as a person of love, as a person of Christ, you don't hold fear in your heart. You're not continuously looking over your shoulder and wondering when the wrath of God is going to come raining down upon you and all you love. I hope you understand the concept of salvation in a way that you're able to live a life of freedom. Choosing to do God's will. Holding mercy and justice as precious and walking humbly with the one who made you. Amen.